This show is all about interviewing interesting people and learning. Now, this episode is going to be spicy. And I'm telling you that because if you are 18 and up and you want to spice up your sex life, then this show is for you. And it's also for your partner. Now, moms and dads, if you have a teenage son, you're also going to learn a lot. But to watch this episode, you need to be age appropriate. So I say that because y'all have been warned. And if you're ready, I know you are going to learn a lot from Jackson Hightower. His videos, they get millions of views. And instead of calling him an expert, I'm gonna call him a sexpert. Okay, Jackson Hightower is joining me now. Jackson, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Ellen. I appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Okay, so just tell me about your background before you became Natural Jackson.
So, beginning of my life, martial artist, always a great student athlete, a Division I college sports player. I have studied the martial arts, I've studied the dance arts, I've studied the sports arts, I've studied the erotic arts. And I've spent the last 20 years, really like discovering this question of like, what does it take to become an unforgettable lover, like to be unforgettable in the bedroom? But I started out with, humble roots, playing sports, studying, school, working with masters, teachers, senseis across all aspects of my life to become the best at whatever it is that I was at, practicing at that point.
And Ivy League educated too.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, so did you also live outside of the country too to kind of learn some of this?
I've spent a lot of time traveling. I've spent tremendous years. I was probably about 6 or 7 years of my life being nomadic. Europe, Asia, South America, Central America. So yes, I've spent a ton of time outside the U.S.
Okay. If someone doesn't know anything about you and you're at a dinner party, cocktail party, you're on an airplane and you tell them what you do or they find out what you do, I mean, what do you tell them or what do they ask you? What's the first question that they ask you?
First question is like, how did you get here? What's your origin story? How does someone do that, right? I tell them there's like the funny response, which is, I'm saving dead bedrooms across the globe, which is really what it is that I'm doing and and why I started doing this. Yeah, the origin story, how did you get to where you are? Can I share?
Yeah.
So when I was in school, I had an experience, when I was younger, about 18 or 19 years old, I had an experience being intimate with a girl that was older. I thought I was hotshot, playing, sports and, getting great grades and all this sort of stuff, social, outgoing. And we had an experience we had a number of experiences in a row. And at the end of the sort of 5 or 6 times, she said to me, she's like, look, you're really cool. You're a handsome guy. You play sports, but you don't know what you're doing at all. And you need to learn. And so that hit me like a ton of bricks, right? As someone who's been very precocious, I was a black belt when I was 7.5 years old, always at the top of my game in everything. It hit me, and I said, "Wow, okay, take the note. You're right. I don't actually know what I'm doing." So I have built this learning and this knowledge over the last 20 years because I never wanted anyone to say that again. It doesn't feel good. I know a lot of men have experienced sort of this type of interaction, and it's challenging to your ego. I think men have a lot of value and self-worth. It's tied to their ego, especially tied to their sexual prowess and their capabilities, and that's how we're wired as men.
Yeah, especially when you're like an 18-year-old or 20-something-year-old dude.
Exactly, and most men are in this position. They don't learn. They learn from the bad stuff, which is obviously porn, but it's most readily available. So where else do people learn these things? And back 20 years ago, it was a very different landscape. There was no social media. There weren't other teachers and online platforms that you could learn this stuff. So it was much harder to find. But I've probably invested more in sex education than most people do in their college degrees. But mine it gets results, which is really that's the whole point.
When you told your family like what you were going to be doing, like you were going to go all in on sex education, what was the reaction?
So I didn't end up doing this career path professionally until about 3.5 years ago, until I was about 38. And they love me to death. They understand where I'm at. They want me to be happy. and they just want me to thrive and be successful. So they were actually great. Now, internally, they're probably squeaming and squirmish, and they're in Boston. It's a bit puritanical up there, so it's a little bit different. And their generation obviously is very different from our generation. But they said, great, like go for it and just like knock it out of the park. Whatever it is that you do, like make sure you're happy and you're loving and you're being of service, and you're supporting humanity in some capacity.
You hinted at it a little bit, and it is a completely different situation. And especially, I mean, you and I, when we were in college, yeah, there really wasn't social media. There wasn't, access to sex on your phone like there is now. And I was listening to Howard Stern, and when he was growing up, he has a story that he would look at an old JCPenney like underwear ad. And that is what would get him excited. Completely different situation. So
all he had access to.
Exactly. That's all he had access to as a kid kind of growing up. A girdle, like girdle ads. That's what he talks about, on the radio as when he was growing up. So just kind of talk about the problems that this phone is causing in our society when it comes to the access that people have, and specifically young men right now.
Yeah. So the concept is neural demand. And what the neural is brain demand, neurons and things like that. When Howard was watching, or looking at that static image of girdle or JCPenney underwear ads, right? There is a tremendous amount of neural activity that has to happen to get him into an aroused state to think about what the next steps of that might be, right? He's looking at the ad and it's a static image, but the delta between what he's looking at and what he wants to experience creates a tremendous amount of neural demand. His brain has to work. But think about what's happening right now. We are getting visual stimuli that is incredibly potent, it's incredibly raw, it's incredibly graphic, and there is less and less and less neural demand. But here's the issue. There is incredibly high dopamine that comes with the video nature of what people are watching nowadays. So when I talk about consumption of porn, right? Consumption of porn is the highest amount of dopamine and the lowest amount of neural demand. It's all just being given to you. You don't have to think about a thing, right? Versus back in the day with Playboy and Penthouse and all those magazines, they were static images. You had to actually work. Your brain had to actually fire in order to get there. So what's happening now is that young men are watching these very intense videos that are triggering dopamine to the highest levels they've ever experienced, and yet their neural demand is really nothing. And then what happens is when they're with a partner in real life, there is too big a gap between what they're seeing and what they're watching and the dopamine that's triggered, and then when they're with a partner, the dopamine isn't as high, and it's actually causing tremendous amounts of issues in the bedroom in the form of porn-induced erectile dysfunction. So that's the biggest issue that I see right now going on with young men.
And you were seeing erectile dysfunction with young men, like in their 20s, because they have started potentially watching pornography in their teens, right?
Oh, 11 actually. 11 is the average age of first consumption of pornography. Yeah, it's wild. So the answer is yes. Like that's what I have 1.2 million followers across all social platforms, and I get DMs constantly. And I would say 25 to 30% of my DMs are men across the globe that are under 30 years old that are experiencing what I call porn-induced erectile dysfunction. It's not a physiological thing. Their body should work fantastically, but they're not. It's a psychological thing because their hormones have been triggered in ways that are really detrimental to their health, and they don't understand what's happening. Back in the day, if you were a young kid looking at a static image on a magazine, you could look at it as much as you want, and it would be nowhere near as bad as what's happening with watching even a couple videos on your phone, and the visceral nature of those types of videos. It's worlds apart. And so these young men are saying, I have a problem, I can't get it up. And then they're resorting to taking pharmaceutical drugs to help them get an erection in their 20s. And I'm like, wow, there's something seriously wrong. And so I started catching on to this about 6 months into launching my whole business because I was like, wait, why is this happening? And we've really discovered what's going on physiologically and hormonally with these guys, with these young men.
Wow. And so you also bring up a point that you also, have OnlyFans, and if young guys are looking at OnlyFans, then they have this image that this woman has a true connection with them, which is complete BS.
Yeah, so it starts with porn, and then it's OnlyFans, and then it's dating apps. And the reality is we are creating this culture of digital arousal. And digital arousal generally has no risk associated with it. It is very easy, pay to play. And so what happens is, when men watch porn and they release these hormones like prolactin, which, people know about from like women breastfeeding when their children are satiated after breastfeeding. Same hormone is released in male bodies post-ejaculatory response. So what happens is you're watching this digital experience. You have no risk. You're not going up and having an experience with a human. And then you're getting aroused and you're getting fully satiated while having these digital, experiences. OnlyFans, you pay to play model, right? Changes the whole culture of what it is that we're doing here. And then what happens is, men, they lack the ability to seduce, right? Like it's a whole point of like, how does our society and culture continue, right? It's through a man walking up and talking to a woman somewhere, right? At a bar, at a coffee shop, at a gas, whatever it is, right? So we're in this very strange culture of digital desire, digital arousal, digital seduction, without really developing those natural seduction skills. And that I find is the real kicker for young men, right? It's like, how do we get out of here, right? We're always doing this, into walking down the street, being present, right? And actually being able to go and communicate and have those real conversations that take risk. And they also take potential for rejection, which I think is the most beautiful gift on the planet. But a lot of people are afraid of it.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's the thing, is that if you get rejected on a dating app, then you resort to, hanging out in your home and, watching porn and trying to hook up or whatever, I guess in your imagination, with an OnlyFans model or someone like that. But that ultimately is why your business is thriving right now, because young men need help.
Correct. Yeah. 1 in 3 men report no sex in the last year. The number of women that are getting approached in public has dropped astronomically. Testosterone levels have dropped 30 to 40%. The numbers vary since the 80s. Sperm counts are down. There's a lot of stuff that men are experiencing right now. And those things are both are physiological. They're affecting our hormones. And our hormones affect thoughts. They affect behaviors. They affect actions. So you're talking about a decimation of what make men men.
Yeah. Just kind of talk about why rejection is good for young men.
Yeah, it's a great question. Rejection is the most important thing for young men to experience. One, because it gives you mettle and grit, and it allows you to function in the world. The world and human experience can be really, really challenging, and having setbacks and failures is going to make you stronger, right? The other part of it, which is that 99.9% of people that you meet out there aren't actually for you, statistically. There are only a couple people on the planet that are actually for you in terms of long-term partnership, right? And so if you're out there meeting people and trying to connect and trying to develop experiences, and you get rejected, it's just a gift. It's a sign that this person isn't right for you and you can move on. But the reality is you were in the arena and you had the experience and you went up and you approached and you said hello and you introduced yourself, right? And that is what is lacking right now. It's what's not, in the digital dating apps, it's so easy. You just swipe and, swipe, you swipe, and it's on to the next, on to the next. But there's no gravitas, there's no gravity to it, there's no reality to it, Not to say that they're not helpful in some capacity, but for the vast majority of people who depend on that solely to meet people, I would say really consider that and look at the reasons why. And, go talk to 5 people every day. That's what I tell the guys. I say, talk to 5 people every day. Men, women, doesn't matter. Have the experience of being a human. That is what we're here to do.
And you were saying too that with dating apps, a lot of, I guess, quote, really attractive women, they don't necessarily need a dating app. And so if you're a young man and you are on dating apps, if you actually go and approach a woman, you're going to be kind of not the norm, and she's going to be like, wow, that guy is not the norm, and think that is like super sexy just because he's confident.
Yes, you're an outlier. And the amount of women, especially post-COVID, the amount of women that are approached in public, in real life, has dropped significantly since COVID. And our culture is now normalized, and men are afraid to go up and say hi. And the whole point is, like, as a man, you have to know what it is that you want, and be unwavering in what it is that you want, and don't worry about what the response is, yes or no. You just have to go and do it, and you have to sort of just go and approach and take it. And if that person's interested in you, they'll let you know. And if they're not, they'll let you know, and then you move on with your life, but without taking it personally, right? But yes, you are an outlier in that situation for sure.
Some of the things you've also suggested is, like, guys, go to the gym, go be active, make sure you're working out. And I will say too, guys, we are talking about traditional, man and woman, but obviously you are coaching to young men. You can be in a homosexual relationship too as well. But you also are, telling guys, just get out and about, work out, things like that. You're very pro health. Health-minded.
Yeah, my entire platform is pro-health.
Yeah.
Yeah, pro-health, because sexual health is health. They're not really different from each other. And so when you look at people, like, testosterone levels have dropped and sperm counts have dropped and sedentary lifestyles and obesity, I mean, all of these things impact your health, which impacts your sexual health, your ability to really, enjoy sexual experiences fully as a man, right? You're going to have erectile dysfunction. You're going to have performance anxiety. You might have premature ejaculation. And so working out, boost confidence, boost testosterone, gets your body in shape. You feel good about yourself. You'll feel strong in your body. It also boosts blood flow, right? Nitric oxide production. Resistance training is incredibly important, for men. Being able to be strong, and obviously women generally are attracted to men who are physically strong. That's just how it works biologically. And I think it's something, fit men have such a drastic increase in their sex lives because they're fit, they're in the gym, they're getting out, they're confident in their bodies. It's a cyclical effect, right? One affects the other. Nothing operates in a vacuum. They all work in tandem to help you elevate and have the best possible life that you can.
Yeah. When I was pitching interviewing you to my bosses and to other people, I pitched you as, like, you're the anti-Andrew Tate. And I mean, I think that's like a big compliment, and just the fact that unfortunately, he is out there and he's this kind of big influence, and young men are getting information about him or hearing kind of what he's about. And I think that what the content that you're putting out there is really important, because some of the content that is out there is, like, completely wrong, about what a woman or a young woman or older woman is seeking in a relationship or wanting in the bedroom. It's completely a warped sense of reality.
When that girl grabs behind you and she pulls you forward, she's got a lot to grab onto. All that power, all that muscle you can drive from your abductors. This is a great way to do it. Tons of reps.
I like the fact that you have an opinion about it. What I focus on is really, you bring the masculine energy and you also have a developed feminine essence, right? And that's the balance that we're talking about here. It's why a lot of my followers are also women. It's because they're hearing what I'm sharing, and it's because they are seeking that from partnership. A man needs to understand that if he's going to bulldoze and do all this sort of stuff, like, that's not actually how to create harmony in a partnership or in an intimate experience, right? He has to understand his partner. Men need to learn about women's bodies, about women's psyches, about the way that women think, so that they can understand them better. Because men and women are very different. Men and women operate incredibly differently. Women operate mostly from their emotional centers, and men are much more analytical. Not to say that you can't be both, but these are generalizations. But if men aren't really studying and learning and understanding, how do you operate, like, with the other sex, like with your partner in relational capacity and an intimate capacity, you're missing a huge part of life, right? We learn a lot of stuff in school that we end up forgetting and not needing. but like, where is the knowledge and where is the learning about the thing that everybody wants to be good at? Everyone wants to have great sex, like everyone wants to have great relationships, but are we putting in the work to get to get ourselves in a place where we can have those and be confident and be successful in those experiences?
Yeah, and it goes back to what you were saying, like kind of when you were 18, like you never want someone saying that to you again. And, you know, like, but you're not going to learn that from your mom and dad, and you're not going to learn that in sex education in school. And
You
so,
learn it nowhere.
right, yeah.
You learn it from porn, and you think that that's the path. But what I say about porn is two things. One is you learn all the wrong moves from porn. Nothing that they are experiencing is real in terms of when you are actually intimate with a woman about what they want. The second is you fry your dopamine receptors, and the dopamine and the biggest issue with our generation, especially with this video content, is that dopamine receptors are being fried and desensitized, which means that we don't experience a lot of pleasure outside of this. So we keep coming back to it again and again. And it's the source of our greatest dopamine is this phone, and what we can view on it. And that, you know, really is a huge alarming factor.
I know when you were talking about, you know, the difference between men and women, and you had like a video about if you are in a relationship and you want to like spice it up and sext with your partner, you said I mean, this is a great example. You said, okay, women are reading 50 Shades of Grey, or they're reading like, you know, romance novels. That's why these are all best-selling romance novels. And then dudes are literally just looking at pictures of naked women on, you know, Playboy, where women, they have the imagination, and dudes are just flat out looking at naked pictures of people. So I appreciated that video because I thought it was a good explanation of kind of the different psyche of man versus woman.
Men are highly visual creatures. We are stimulated by our eyes. And that's a biological thing. We see a beautiful woman, we get turned on. We want to be intimate with her. That's really all it takes for us. And it sounds like we're dumbing it down, but like that's just how men operate. They also think that that's how women operate. And the reality is when you think about women's desire, I call it responsive desire. And that means that you kind of have to touch upon all of the different senses for a woman to really be comfortable with a man and getting into an intimate experience. She also has to have an element of trust, right? She has to feel that you are there and you're present and you're accountable for who you are in that experience, because it is sacred. That woman is allowing you inside of her. It's a very serious thing. It's a very sacred thing. So, you know, I use the water and the fire analogy. Like, men are like fire. They're just ready. They're ready to rock. And the women are like the water, and they're in the pot of water, and the water needs to boil. But the men need to spend more time, energy, and effort boiling that water to get to that point where the water is at the same level as the fire, right? And then they're at an equal playing field. But it involves foreplay, it involves, you know, connectivity, it involves, you know, touch, smell, scent, all of the senses for a woman to really, really drop into her most feminine state and be able to surrender into that experience in a harmonious way.
Yeah, and you asked a lot of women, how do you know when a guy is bad in bed? And the results, the feedback was that they brag that they're good in bed, which is the opposite. Zero curiosity, so they're not asking you what you might like. They don't care. They're just like, whatever, you know. You just brought that up. Skipping foreplay.
Mm-hmm.
Jackhammering, so you said that would be rough, and then just bad hygiene. So, you know, I mean, kind of the basic stuff.
Yeah, it's basic stuff. It's fingers, it's nails, it's hands. You know, women pay attention to things that the guys don't necessarily pay attention to. And so a guy needs to focus on, like, how do I present myself in a way that a woman is going to say, okay, I can, like, this is someone who I would consider being intimate with, right? And it's all of that stuff. It's how fast they move in the bedroom experience, right? It's about their ability to listen and pay attention. Are they performing because they've watched it on porn, or are they actually connected and present with you, right? Because that's really what women are looking for presence with a man in that bedroom experience. And it's less about the moves, and it's less about the techniques. It's more about, is this man with me? And he's not just in his head, but he's in his body. and he's in his heart. Can he feel me, right? And is he in his breath? Is he able to actually have an experience where he's calm and he's connected? Because that is the biggest turn on for women that I've experienced.
That they're calm, connected, they're into you, they're asking kind of, okay, they're connected, yeah. Okay, so Jackson, we've kind of been talking about, what men like, what women like. We didn't talk about what men like or what you surveyed about men, and men are not necessarily as picky when it comes to their requirements. They just were kind of saying that you got to be careful with your teeth for women if you're down there, right?
Men are we're pretty easy.
Yeah.
We're easy. As long as you're there and you're present, usually it's going to be a good experience. Okay. Which is, again, it's a little bit like debasing men, but the reality is it's like we're much easier to connect with because our arousal centers are much more focused on like this person in front of us. You know what I mean? And that's visually what we see.
Yep. You do coach women too, but mostly you are coaching young men is predominantly what you are doing.
Well, it depends. So my platform is about 50-50 male female in terms of like my followers. Every platform has a different demographic. There's a lot of women 35 to 55 years old on Facebook. There's a lot of women on TikTok. Instagram is 65 to 70% male. But the age range for the most part is 25 to 55 years old.
Okay. Talk about breathing and why breathing, how you control your breath is really important in the bedroom.
Yeah. So breath work is, and breathing especially, is the fastest way to get into your parasympathetic nervous system. So to give an example, sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight. It's running away from a tiger. Parasympathetic is rest and digest. As a man, when your body is in your sympathetic nervous system, you are producing cortisol and adrenaline. Those are stress hormones. You think that those are good for when you're having a sexual experience, but they're not. The reason why is because they are erection killers. They immediately disallow your body to have and maintain an erection because your body is saying there's something going on that's not okay, that we're not safe. You want to get into your parasympathetic, right? And that's going to alleviate premature release because you have more control. It's going to alleviate, erectile dysfunction and performance anxiety, which are all three results of watching too much porn. So when you breathe, especially when you breathe from your diaphragm, deep in your belly, you're able to activate your parasympathetic nervous system. That creates more blood vessel dilation, which is obviously what we want. It creates more relaxation to your central nervous system, and it allows your partner to actually feel how relaxed you are. And they can also drop into that space of you being like creating the container of, what are we experiencing here, right? Is it shallow breaths or is it deep, profound, slower breaths, right? That's what breath work is so important for. The biggest thing I tell guys when they're having issues is like, you have to learn how to breathe and you have to practice it just like you do everything else.
And also there are like exercises that you kind of recommend, like, making sure that your hips are solid, doing hip thrusts at the gym. I mean, you gotta work out, and right?
Yeah, sexercises or sexletics. Like the reality is most men have very, very tight hips. We don't have a lot of hip flexion and hip mobility unless we've trained it or we're an athlete. So I benefit from this because my background as a martial artist, our whole thing was about hip flexion, kicking, knee strikes, all that sort of stuff, doing full splits on the ground. I have that, and I've been utilizing it and maintaining it for the rest of my life. But a lot of guys don't have that, and so in my programs, I have whole exercise routines where I go through and I'm like, this is how you get your adductors, which are the muscles in between your knees and your groin, essentially, to become stronger or to be more flexible. How do we get our glutes, to be firing in the right way? And how do we release these hips so that we can actually perform better and into different positions that we would normally, right? If you're stiff in bed and you can't move, you're not going to be able to do a lot of stuff in there, right? It's going to be pretty stale.
Interesting. Sex, in your opinion, is it better in your 40s and 50s than it is in your 20s?
Absolutely. Sex is so much better. And well, for me in my 40s, I'm not 50 yet, but it's a lot better. You have more connection to your body. You have a better understanding of the female body. You know the things that you need to do in order to increase pleasure and increase orgasm potential. You have knowledge and wisdom and awareness. If you eat right and train right and all that sort of stuff, your erectile quality is the same, and you're able to last a lot longer than you would when you're in your 20s. Yes, in your 20s you have the most virality and you can get erections constantly, and your refractory period is less. But at the same time, you probably go too quick and you don't know how to elongate that experience. So I would say, and also in your 40s, you're not so pressed to have the conquest. You want to actually create an experience and bond and connect more deeply, which is something that women are really attracted to.
Yeah.
Well, so that's why it's significantly better.
I think too. I mean, for women, I think as a woman, when you hit 40, there's something about confidence that it's a completely different ballgame. And I'm not even talking about sex. I'm just talking about just confidence in general. When you're a woman in your 40s, it's a game changer. It just is. Like maybe you had self-esteem issues or even body image issues when you were in your 20s. And it's like in your 40s, you're just like, whatever, I don't care. This is who I am. And, like me or not, whatever, I don't care.
Yeah.
And so I think that probably also, kind of, you can apply that to anything.
Yeah. And on the women's side, like, women are more comfortable in their bodies. They produce more testosterone in their late 30s and into their 40s than they did when they were younger. So they actually are more potentially sexually active and higher libidos in some instances. And they have less like worries and cares. So it's a much easier experience. Sex drives of 20-year-olds and sex drives of 40-year-olds are usually different in terms of men. But female sex drives in the late 30s and 40s is actually quite similar to the sex drives of guys in their early 20s, which is interesting. That's how you get the whole cougar dynamic.
Nice. Okay. Well, no, it makes sense. It totally does. And then honestly too, if there's like menopause or perimenopause stuff, and you're working with, a doctor, and you're maybe doing some hormone replacement therapy too, then that can also be an issue too. So yeah, it makes 100% sense. Okay, let's talk about if you are happily married and what is normal? Like, what is it? Sex once a week, twice a week? What is like, quote, normal?
I think normal is about once a week. I think people should focus on 2 to 3 times a week if possible, especially if they're in a marriage with kids, which, just to be clear, I am not. The issue is this: we want to create novelty in our experiences and our relationships, and it's very tough to do that when you have kids and life and work and all this sort of stuff that's getting in the way of that. We want to create more dopamine, right? And if you're in a routine and if you're in a rut and you do the same thing over and over again with your partner and you see them all the time and you do all this sort of, that doesn't allow for a lot of novelty and dopamine response. And so the question that I get often is, how do we spice things up? You have to do different things. You have to do different activities. You have to go to different places. You have to find different music. You have to go to different restaurants. Something that is going to allow you to have a novel experience with your partner. And that's really what it comes down to. Is it easy as you have those experiences with kids and all that sort of stress? No. Set a date night. Make sure that you're connected. Have 2 different phone communication channels. iMessage used for your logistical life. WhatsApp used for your sexy, flirty conversations, right? Create separation. Use different bathrooms so that it doesn't become so normal to watch your wife go to the bathroom while you're brushing your teeth, if you're able to, right? Just little things like that over time compound into creating more polarity in the experience, because otherwise the polarity dies.
Yeah. No, it's great advice, because it's like that you were the couple before the kids, before, the chaos, before everything else. So, I think that's great advice. Social media, certainly has been positive for your business. And you wouldn't be able to do what you do.
Correct. Oh, 1,000%. Yeah, it gives you, it's funny. I create and I post. I'm not a massive consumer of social media. However, it is the most important platform for being able to create and share a message that you think is important. And there are a lot of people on social media who I feel probably don't share a lot of things that are important. That's just my own opinion. But like my whole purpose of this business was like, how do I reach the masses? And how do I share this message with people all across the globe? I've got a huge following in India and the Philippines and the Middle East, which was so strange to me. But you figure out like, where are the men that are really hungry for this information? Obviously, the United States is the most, consumption. But it's a great platform when it's used properly. Yeah.
Has there been any negative from social media that really kind of stands out in your mind?
I would say that, just like when you're a very famous actor, you can't read the tabloids. That's that phrase. You can't read all the tabloids because you're going to go crazy.
Yeah.
There are a lot of nasty people on the internet. When you talk about sex, a lot of people get triggered, and it's not. And I understand it, and I accept it. I think it's easy as a passive platform with a username to lash out at people and say whatever it is that you think about them. The reality is, I use like the Teflon. I don't like Teflon, but like that whole concept of like, you just got to let it roll off your back, right? People say a lot of nasty stuff, and nobody knows me, right? Those people don't know who I am and how meaningful this work is to me and how much I care, and how much effort I put into creating really educational content twice a day for the last 2.5 years, which is a tremendous amount of effort. So I ignore it mostly, and I just move on, and I stay really focused on what is my mission.
What's the number one question that people are reaching out to you about, like on a daily basis?
Yeah, well, how do I quit porn is a big one.
Yeah, got it.
That's the huge one. I mean, porn is one of the biggest industries in the world. It's like
Yeah.
$110 billion, dollar industry. I think men use, I think it's like 1,000 hours a year scrolling through porn.
Oh my God.
1 in every 3 downloads on the internet is porn. Like it's pretty wild. So
Wow.
quitting porn is a massive, massive issue. And I always start there, because if you don't have a healthy connection with your own sexual energy, it is going to be very difficult for you to have a healthy connection with a partner. Okay. So we always start with here. Guys come in, oh, I want to learn techniques, I want to learn this. It's never really about that. It's about, let's get aligned internally, and then we can focus the energy externally.
Jackson Hightower, Natural Jackson, thank you so much. I encourage you guys to check out his Instagram. He's on TikTok. Again, Natural Jackson, millions of views on social media. Videos like The Real Secret to Lasting Longer, The 6 Components of a Skilled Lover, What Men Need to Know About Women in the Bedroom. Again, the videos are very educational, and thank you so much again for your time. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you all learned something. I know I certainly did. And thank you once again. We have more episodes up of The Curious Bee on Fox Local.